What's up guys, I'm Jeff, the founder of Worldwide Cyclery, and today we're going to dive into a review of the Mondraker Foxy 2.9. Well, if you've not heard of Mondraker, that would be no surprise because the brand, although a pretty big international mountain bike brand, has always historically had very little distribution in the United States, and I think honestly this might be the first one I've ever seen in my life and got the chance to ride. They're very rare, at least in North America. The brand is based out of Spain, and they definitely are big on the World Cup scene. They make quite a bit of bikes. They have everything from hardtails, e-bikes, World Cup winning downhill bikes, enduro bikes, you name it, they've got a good bike for it. But they obviously do focus just on sort of higher end mountain bikes, and that's kind of the boutique aspect that they bring to the table. The brand has been around, I think, for about 15 years now, and the Foxy 2.9 is, I believe, their first longer travel 29er trail / enduro mountain bike that they brought to the market, and it is absolutely phenomenal. Something that Mondraker's been doing for quite some time now that they've a little bit got their reputation for is the forward geometry. So bike sizing and bike geometry is a big topic in the mountain bike world. I've always had some interesting views on the whole thing and really like to experiment with a lot of stuff. I actually, a while back, maybe a year or two ago, I cut the seat tube on a Yeti 4.5 because I wanted to ride a size XL frame, and being 5'8", I couldn't fit on it. So I cut the seat tube. Check that video out, it's pretty interesting. In that video, I dive a lot more into bike sizing and sort of how I think a lot of it is personal preference, and maybe not even personal preference, but it's also just what you as the rider are looking for out of your bike. Are you looking for something a little more agile and playful, or something a little bit more long and planted? Do your preferences change over time? Does that matter depending on the travel of the bike? All of that. So sizing is something we're going to talk about quite a bit with this bike because Mondraker is known for that forward geometry, which means it's a longer bike with a really short stem. Let's dive into some of that stuff right now. So the more of a mountain bike nerd you are, you probably know some of the common things these days that people are really talking about and paying attention to in bike geometry. Some of those are offset forks. We made a video on that. Why are all these manufacturers going to shorter offset forks? Head angle has been sort of a key point on bike geometry for ages now. The other thing that's recently cropped up and been talked about a lot in the last couple of years is C-tube angle. So the Mondraker does use a shorter offset fork. It's a 44 millimeter offset fork. Again, bike is long, bike is slack. Slack 66, so it's actually not as slack as some of the other more aggressive bikes out there. So Transition Sentinel, Yeti SB150, those are both bikes that are in a similar travel range to this thing that are actually slacker than this. So this bike does come stock at 66 degrees, but included with the bike are some headset cups, so you can make that a degree steeper or a degree slacker if you wanted. I rode the thing at 66 the way that they spec it, and I thought that felt awesome. To me, having a bike that's this length at that offset fork, that degree head angle was pretty ideal. It to me just felt really balanced, and it felt like I was properly centered on the bike. Every new bike you switch to does take some getting used to, and that is where a lot of people really sort of, you could say, trip out when they hop on a different bike, especially something that is sized very differently than what they've been riding. I watched some other reviews on this bike and talked to some other people who have ridden it, and it's almost a little comical to me to listen how much people overthink bike sizing and talk about how, they had to shift their hips forward and this and that, and I don't know, a lot of that to me is like, you have to understand how you feel and know what geometry numbers you feel good on. It takes a long time of riding mountain bikes and being sort of a bike snob / bike nerd to really understand that and know, hey, this is the kind of head angle I like and the reach that I like and chainstay length that I like, etc. But the more you get into it, the more you sort of learn that stuff. And sizing, again, is the confusing thing about it is they call this, so this is a medium size right here. It has a 470 millimeter reach. So for comparison, that's 10 millimeters longer than a Yeti SB150 in the same size. And it's about, overall, most of these specs add up to be about the size of like a large Transition Smuggler. So again, does the stamp of that like small, medium, large, extra large really matter? or is it just kind of you riding the bike that, you know, has the numbers that you prefer or that you like? And also understanding what those do, right? So what does a longer reach and a shorter stem feel like versus a shorter reach and a longer stem? Bike sizing is a very confusing topic, so we're always recommending people get out there, actually ride bikes. All these new brands, I shouldn't say all of them, but a lot of new brands are going toward this longer, you know, longer front end, slacker head angle, offset fork geo. So if you get a chance to get out there and ride the things, try it out, but don't get too stuck up in your own head thinking like, oh, I normally ride a large, so I'm gonna ride a large here. I prefer a large transition right now. I ride a large Yeti, but on this thing, I ride a medium because it's, you know, so unusually large that this to me is like, you know, what I would consider proper sizing for a bike. I feel really comfortable at my height, being 5'8", riding the medium size frame. Some people might look at this and be like, wow, this is longer than my large, or even maybe longer than like, you know, an older XL size bike. But sizing is a very complicated thing these days. So don't get too wrapped up in it. If you have a chance to ride something, or if you have a chance to kind of just like, you know, analyze the numbers of the bike that you're currently riding, and then think about, you know, what is another bike that your buddy has, or some bikes that you've demoed, etc. Don't get too confused on the whole thing. Just hop on stuff, test out different things, and also try to learn sort of what you like and what you feel the most comfortable on. Because again, feeling comfortable on a bike is what's going to make you ride really well. C-tube angle, it's not the steepest. So this is 75.5. What's kind of considered steep these days is usually 77 degrees. C-tube angles, effective C-tube angles, really come into play when you're seated climbing. And when you're seated climbing, you want a steeper C-tube angle because it puts your body in a really good position. 75.5 to me is ample, works good. I have no issues with it. Yeah, there might be certain scenarios where you want to ride the front end of the saddle a little bit more. However, you know, a bike like a SB 150 or 130 that has a 77, or some transitions as well, some other brands that are, you know, pushing the limits of a steeper C-tube angle, that's something you might realize that, you know, that does help a little bit climbing. But again, not something to get too wrapped up in on, and you can just kind of adjust your body position to sort of feel comfortable in a climbing position there. So before I ramble on more about bike sizing, let's show you guys some of the actual geo numbers of this thing in the different sizes and compare it to some popular bikes that you might be familiar with. Comparing the Mondraker Foxy 2.9's 470mm reach and 66-degree head angle and the size medium frame, the next most relevant bike to compare it to that's got very modern, long slack geo is the Yeti SB 150 with 10mm shorter reach at 460 and a way slacker head angle at 64.5. Another familiar bike, Santa Cruz Hightower LT, 423mm reach at a 66.4 head angle. So way shorter on that thing as far as reach, but the Hightower LT is probably not the most modern geo at the moment, and I wouldn't be surprised if Santa Cruz comes out with something soon enough that's a little bit longer. Specialized Enduro, that's got a 440mm reach on the size medium and a 66-degree head angle. So as you can tell, for a quote-unquote size medium frame, the Foxy 2.9 is definitely on the longer side and probably longer than any of the more common bikes out there, excluding things like the rare boutique European brands such as Pole or the Geometron. All right, so enough about bike sizing. Let's talk about how this thing actually rides on the trail. I can tell you right away that this bike goes toe-to-toe with some of the best super bikes that I've ridden. So if you're considering this thing over some other crazy super bikes, I can absolutely assure you it rides just as good as the best of them. Some of the notable things I noticed on this thing that I really liked, I do like how lightweight the frame is. The pedaling platform is amazing. For a 150mm travel bike, I never felt the urge to put this thing in the climb mode. It just stays stable. It has enough suppleness to it that when you're in those technical climbs, it'll still stick to the ground and not feel too stiff on you, but it's not going to bob. Even when you're out of the saddle pushing pretty hard on it, the thing does just feel like it accelerates really well. The acceleration of this bike was another notable thing for me. When you would push hard on the pedals, the bike does just move forward. It feels really good in that sense. And that same type of feeling is also sort of there when you're pushing and pumping into a corner, and we actually bunny hop the bike. So of all of the 150mm travel 29ers that I've ever bunny hopped, I feel like I can bunny hop higher on this bike, which is a weird thing to say and notice, but a lot of the trails that we ride locally around here have those sort of, you know, bars before them, and a lot of times I don't bunny hop them when I'm on a longer travel bike because I'm just worried I'm not going to be able to do it high enough. So I kind of just tend to do it only on the short travel stuff. This thing I was able to make all of them, and I think it's the only bike of this travel range that I did that on. Weird thing, but it is something to notice. The reason longer travel 29ers are getting so popular these days is because they really are that sort of one quiver bike, right? That's a terminology that's really gaining traction, and having a bike that does pedal this well and descend this well is something a lot of riders out there are experiencing on these long travel 29ers and sort of falling in love with. And this thing, like I said, goes toe to toe with the best of those other long travel 29ers. Descending wise, my only complaint there was sort of the linear feel of the suspension. It was supple and awesome and definitely soaked everything up, but with the stock spacers they have in there, I think they just have a 0.2 volume spacer in the rear shock. I definitely want to put some more spacers in there and make it a little bit more progressive, because I did end up bottoming it out a couple times. Otherwise, it was smooth, it was plush, it was supple off the top, and that zero suspension system that Mondraker uses, although it can kind of look like a traditional 4-bar, it actually feels a heck of a lot different once you ride the thing. It pedals better and it definitely descends better, especially in that I would call it that high speed mid-stroke stuff. That's where this bike really shines, when you're just flying down a trail. Nothing where you're getting super hard G-outs, but just that mid-stroke stuff, that's where this bike just flows. It's definitely got that long feeling to it, so it's a good, stable, fast bike, and something that I really enjoyed. All around, climbing, descending, I was totally impressed with this bike. There was multiple times where I just felt like my body position was perfect on it, and the bike stuck to the ground and cornered really well. Again, I've heard a lot of other reviews and people talk about these bikes, or just longer bikes in general, and how much it kind of messes with their head in terms of body positioning and traction and all of that sort of stuff. To me, it's something you adapt to as a rider, and for me, when I rode this thing, I adapted to it pretty quick and was just totally impressed with how well the suspension worked uphill, downhill, and just more importantly, those corners and that traction was where the thing really shined for me. So let's dive into some pros and cons of these bikes. All right, pros and cons. Well, the first pro for me is absolutely looks. I think these bikes look incredible. I've sort of been a fan of the Mondraker aesthetic for several years now and love the look of their downhill bikes when I see them being raced on the World Cup circuit. And Foxy 29 looks incredible, in my eyes at least. I love the top tube and how slim and slender that is, and just this unique look they have going on is awesome. And weight kind of falls under a pro as well, and the thing is as light as it looks. It's typically, from what I've looked at, it's been hard to figure out, but it seems to be about a pound or a pound and a half lighter than most of the competing longer travel 29er bikes that are that you would stack up against this in a comparison. Another pro, suspension platform. So sort of what I mentioned in the on the trail portion. I love the suspension platform in this thing. I really do think it pedals extremely well and it descends extremely well. Could use another volume spacer or two from what they spec it with, but other than that, I really think that this suspension platform works amazing, and like I said before, it goes toe to toe with the best super bikes out there. The progressive forward geo to me is a big pro. I really do like the concept that Mondraker uses with this forward geometry. And the biggest thing with that too is just don't be afraid to size down. If you're riding something, if you're riding a medium or large now and you look at the sizing of this when it comes to reach and it's unusually larger, don't be afraid to size down. I haven't ridden a size medium bike in years, even though technically at my height, 5'8", I typically fall into that size medium frame category, but I never ride them. I don't like them. I almost always ride larges. And this thing, I'm riding a medium, so I wasn't afraid to size down, and I love it, and that has the numbers that I like. So if you do grab one of these, don't be afraid to size down. The other pro, rarity. So this brand, like I mentioned, has a kind of a lack of distribution in North America, so you almost never see them, which to me makes it really cool. If you ride up to the trailhead with one of these things, you can be rest assured probably no one else is going to have one. They are coming to the US a little bit more these days, so you might see a little, more of them trickle in, but probably not. If you show up with something that looks like this, not only do their paint schemes look super rare, but the brand is super rare in North America, and just this look looks so unique and different that, to me, that's a huge pro for these things. Cons to the Foxy 29er. Well, as much as rarity is a pro, it's also a little bit of a con. These things are pretty hard to come by, so if you want to demo one, it's going to be a little bit harder than some of the more popular brands in North America, so that's a little bit of a bummer. As of right now, these things are only being sold in North America through brick and mortar retail stores. We're lucky enough to be one of them, although we don't have any demos as of yet. We might if we get some more interest in the future, but rarity, as much of a pro, it is a little bit of a con when it comes to a rare boutique brand like this. That does lead me into value as well. So being a more rare European brand, when it comes to value, when I say value, what I mean is what what you're getting for what you pay for. Sure, you're getting a absolutely gorgeous, phenomenal looking frame, but when you compare the parts on this bike compared to some of the parts on other competing brands and look at the price points, these aren't the best. That's a little tough to swallow, but again, you're not buying a Mondraker because you're a value hunter. You're buying it because you want a gorgeous, rare, Spanish bike brand that works absolutely amazing. So that's why you'd buy a Foxy 29, and in my eyes, I think it's worth those extra pennies. Let us know down in the comments, what do you guys think of this bike, and if you'd ever consider buying one. Make sure to share this with your mountain bike buddies, hit that subscribe button, and we'll see you in the next one.